Hey everybody, this is Sheila Ryan with Designs by Babymoon. Today I'm going to show you a tutorial for making a cute in the hoop mug rug. So this one happens to have an applique daisy on it, but we're going to walk through all of the steps and you'll see how the design is built completely on your embroidery machine. It has quilting, it has applique, it's got raw edges that we'll have to talk about. There's a lot of fun to be had in making a mug rug. So let's go over to the embroidery machine and I'll show you how to do it. If you like this video, be sure to click the like button and subscribe so you can see more fun tutorials like this. I come out with tutorials all the time for in the hoop and ridiculously cute embroidery designs, and I know that you'll love them. All right, let's head to the embroidery machine. So we're over at the embroidery machine, and you can see that I've got the design all loaded up. It tells us that there's about 12 minutes of stitching on my machine, and that's stitching at 860 stitches per minute. So it's going to take a little bit longer than 12 minutes because, first of all, I'm talking you through all of the steps, which you can see if you print out the PDF tutorial file that's in the file set. But because we're going to talk through it, it's going to take a few more minutes. But I'm going to explain why we have those steps in there like that. So let's look at the steps we've got first. We can kind of scroll through here and see what we've got. We've got the a background stitch. We've got a placement stitch for our fabric, our batting, and so we know where we're going to put things. And then we've got placement stitches for each of these applique areas. So the design's going to walk through several of these steps. But first, what we really need to figure out is what color we're going to do all these things in. So you can see the design has several applique parts. It's got leaves, it's got the petal area, and it's got the center of the applique. And of course, you'll need to pick the fabric for your background. And you'll need background fabric that is the same on the front and the back, or they can be mix and match. These are great scrap busters. I save all of my scraps from larger quilting projects, and I love using them for mug rugs and coasters and these little in the hoop projects. I hate to throw scraps away, and sometimes when they're too small or I only have a little bit left that's not big enough to incorporate into another quilting project, I just keep it and I use it for these mug rugs. They're just beautiful and fun, especially made from the gorgeous quilting fabrics. Anyway, we're going to pick all the fabrics that we're going to use for this project. So the first thing that we're going to need though is we're going to need our stabilizer. And for this project, I'm going to be using a Polymesh stabilizer that is for machine embroidery. It's not interfacing. It's specifically a polyester mesh stabilizer just for machine embroidery. So we're going to load that into the hoop. I'm going to work in a hoop that's a little bit larger than I actually need. This is my 8x8 hoop, or the square 20B is the name of the hoop for my Janome. It's 200 by 200 millimeters. So it's about 8 inches by 8 inches. Now you can do this project in a 5x7 hoop, but because I'm showing this to you on this video, I like to use a bigger hoop because it gives me a little bit more room to work in. Okay, I've got my stabilizer and I'm going to cut off a piece big enough to fit in my hoop. And I'm just going to cut that off. You can get stabilizer in pre-cut sheets. I like getting it on the roll because that means I can cut it to the size that I want. And so what I am doing here is I'm just making sure I have a nice flat surface. Sometimes I need to move things out of the way. The hardest part about machine embroidery is clearing off a space that is flat and clear so that you can get a proper hooping. So I am moving these cords out of the way. Let's see if I can show you a little bit what I'm doing. Okay, so I've got a flat surface. I've covered my hoop with the stabilizer, and I'm going to put the inner hoop on. Now I can see that it's nice and flat, but I'm going to do some adjusting once I put my inner hoop on to make sure that my stabilizer is taut and tight in the hoop. Now I'm securing the screw at the corner. I'm not hooping any fabric. I'm just hooping the stabilizer. And I want it to be tight enough that it kind of bounces and has a little drum sound when I tap on it. Let's see if we can get closer so you can hear that. It's just a subtle sound, but it's enough to tell me that my stabilizer is tight enough. And I'm going to attach my hoop to the machine. Let's pull it back into the frame here. Okay, I'm thinking about the colors that I'm going to use for this design. And the first color that I need is not necessarily the color of the placement stitch. The first color I need is actually the color of the background of the quilting for this mug rug. And so I'm loading a color that I think will coordinate nicely with the background fabric that I've chosen. And I'm going to use that for the first several steps before the quilting, just so that it shows up well on camera. Now, you could use separate colors, but I think there's no need to use a different color for something that's going to be enclosed in all of your fabric. So this is my background fabric, and it's this really great, it's by Tim Holtz Eclectic Elements, the Abandoned line. And this is just some scraps from a larger project that I did. And I've got, a good chunk that's perfect for a mug rug. The file set tells you how much fabric you're going to need. And I know I'm going to need a piece. I'm an eyeballer. I'm not a measurer. And so you can eyeball your pieces, but as you get comfortable with the project, you'll know about how much fabric you need. So I've got my fabric now cut for the front and back. The other thing that I'm going to need is a piece of batting that is going to cover the area of the placement stitch. And so I have a strip of batting that I cut off of a quilt that I was working on. And these strips generally are just the right size for my rug edges. So when you have 6 inches on the edge, extra for the quilting part. So what I'm doing is I'm going to run the placement stitch first, okay? And I just have regular white embroidery bottom thread in the machine. And this outline is going to show me where I need to put both my batting as well as the fabric to cover this area. So unlike a sewing machine project where we would cut it and, exactly, we actually need a little bit more than we're working on, because we're letting the machine do a lot of the work for us, and then we're trimming it down. So I need a little bit more batting than the area on the hoop. And I'm eyeballing it, and I'm going to cut this chunk off so I don't have more fabric flapping around that I don't need. And I'm covering both the placement stitch with the batting, and I'm covering the batting with my background fabric. Okay, so I've got 2 layers. Now, your embroidery machine is probably going to hold this down well, but if you don't feel secure about that, you could use a little bit of tape to tape down the fabric at the edges. You could use some embroidery safe adhesive spray. I know that my machine's going to be just fine, and so I'm going to lower my presser fit and run the next step, which is a outline stitch, again, to hold these pieces down. If you wanted to, you could run that outline stitch and then trim the batting away, just run it on the batting. I'm just going to put my fabric and the batting together here. This is going to hold it all down for me really well. And then it's going to run the quilting that is the background of the design. This is where your batting gets quilted into the fabric and gives it a really neat little texture to the background. Okay, so that's the tack down. And now it's time for the quilting. So we're going to let that run. And again, it's going around, the design goes around to provide some security. So at this point, if you had used tape, you could remove that now, because our design is held down quite well with the design. Our fabric are all held down, is what I mean. So now we're running those quilting lines, and this is just a single stitch, just like a quilting, if you're doing quilting on your sewing machine or on your long arm, it's the same kind of stitch. It's a very simple run stitch, just one layer, a single running stitch. And it just gives some texture to the background. This is a fun diamond shape. Just a little bit of texture, a little bit of extra softness. And it's going to do a crisscross diamond grid in the background all the way across the fabric. Now, after this step, the design is going to start stitching the elements of this daisy design in particular. So I know, because I made the design, that I got a stem and then that it's going to stitch first before we start applique. But then it's going to do the leaves. And I want the stem and the leaves, I don't want to have to change colors. So I'm going to use the same green color that I'm going to be using for the applique of the leaves to actually create the stem. And so again, that's another time where I don't have to change the thread so many times. Okay, our quilting is done on the machine. And so yes, I'm going to change my thread now. And let's put in our green thread. And again, I haven't changed my bobbin thread. I'm just using regular bobbin thread. I like pre-wounds because they are convenient for me. I do embroidery a lot. And so doing the pre-wounds is really nice for just regular embroidery projects. When I'm doing freestanding lace, I do like to wind my own bobbins so that my top and bobbin threads match. But for this project, you can just use white embroidery thread. Okay, I've got my needle threaded. And now I'm going to run that stem. Your embroidery design may have different steps. One thing I do like to do is, as my lines of stitching for the actual elements of the design get started, is trim the tail. So I will stop the machine very soon after it starts so that I can take care of that thread tail, just so it doesn't get caught in any of that stitching. I like to keep it tidy, and that way I don't have to worry so much about doing a whole lot of trimming later. Now, one thing you might notice in doing an applique design is your machine may tell you that it wants you to use certain colors. You are in charge of the colors that your design is going to be made up of. So where mine says now it's time for light blue, I'm not going to use light blue. This is drawing an outline for me of where I need to place my applique material for the leaves. I'm going to use the same green that I used for the stem to do the outline for the leaves, and I'm not going to change my thread. So I'm in charge here, not the machine. Those colors are different because they are programmed to tell the machine it's time to stop and let you work on it. Okay, so I've got my leaves in there, and I've got a piece of fabric that's been treated with Heat and Bond Lite. You can see on the back it's kind of shiny. That's the Heat and Bond Lite. You might like Seam a Seam or another brand of fusible. I like the Heat and Bond Lite because it works well with the needles and my projects. So feel free to use whatever stabilizer or heat applique material you like. After this project is done, I am gonna take it to the iron and then fuse this all from the backside just to help that bond together. But the Heat and Bond Lite actually helps the material not fray on the edges. This is a raw edge applique. It doesn't have any satin stitches around the edge, and so I don't want it to fray. If you want that frayed look, then you could certainly just leave the Heat and Bond off. I like my edges to be clean. And because this is a mug rug, the idea is it can be washed, and it's just a little piece of cotton fabric. So it can be washed just like a placemat or a coaster done with your kitchen linen laundry. And, if it's going to get washed, then those edges do have the opportunity to ravel just a little bit. Okay, I'm going to bring you just a little bit closer so you can see better what I'm doing here on the hoop. Okay, so this piece of fabric has been tacked down. It tacked down both of these leaves. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove my hoop, and then I'm using these Kai double curved scissors here. See how they have a nice curve? It lets me get down into the hoop closer to the fabric, and I'm just going to lift up my fabric and give it a little bit of tension as I go around the applique area. And I am trimming the fabric off as close as I can to the stitching without cutting the stitching. Now, don't be too upset if you can't get terribly close to it right now. This is something you just need to practice. And so I don't always get it perfectly, but when your project is completely done, you do have the opportunity to trim a little bit closer. These applique edges are not covered up by anything else. But the ones on the petal, there's a scoop in the top of the petal that will be covered up by later fabric. So if your fabric's going to be covered up by another layer, you don't have to worry about your careful trimming so much, unless your fabric is sheer and see-through. And then in that case, you definitely want to, keep that applique clean and tidy. But my leaves are trimmed well, and I'm very happy with that. And so I'm going to put my hoop back on the machine. And now I'm going to run a finishing stitch for this applique area. Make sure I didn't trim my thread. Okay, we're good. And this finishing stitch is kind of a blanket stitch. It's just going to give a little bit of a decorative finish to those leaves. Now I can see my thread tail right there, and I don't want it caught in that stitching. I'm just trimming that off really quickly and continuing. The next step after these leaves is going to be the petal area. And so I'm going to choose a fabric for the petal area that I think will contrast nicely to the background. Okay, it's got one leaf completely done, and it's just moving over to the other leaf. Okay, I'm going to do my flower, the daisy part, in this kind of white tone on tone material. And so I'm going to change my thread. Now I'm not going to use a white thread for it. I am going to use this light kind of creamy color. I just think it'll have a nice effect with a little bit of contrast in the thread. It's just real subtle. But you can, you can match your threads to the fabric exactly, or you can, do something that has a little bit of contrast or a lot of contrast. There's no rules in this. This is your project, and you get to decide how you like it to be. So what I'm going to do now is run the placement stitch for that petal area. Now this is not, there are 4 petals on the flower, but it's not 4 different pieces of fabric. It's just one piece that has all of the petals on it. So it's just the idea of petals. Okay, so there is our outline, and I'm just going to place this fabric that's already been treated and ready. I'm just going to place the whole piece under here. You could use the template on the color map PDF to get an exact, cut of fabric, but this is, like I said, this is out of my scrap bin, so I just pull it out, cut what I need off, and then put the rest back in my scrap bin for other projects. Okay, so there's our tack down stitches. And it does run, different designs have different steps that the designer will use for their different steps. On mine, I generally have a single run for the placement stitch, and then a double run where the stitches go over themselves twice for the tack down, because I feel like that gives us a little bit of extra security when we're trimming our fabric. So if it was a single running stitch and I accidentally nicked the stitching while I was trimming, then it would, the whole thing would come unraveled, and that would be a problem. Well, it wouldn't be, it might be a problem. And so because I've gotten a double stitch, I know that if I nick one of the stitches just a little bit, there's another layer of stitching underneath there, just to give me a little bit of extra wiggle room. I need a lot of margin in my life, and so that's one way I get it, by adding the wiggle room. Now this scoop of this flower right here is going to be covered up by a subsequent layer, so I'm not going to trim that too carefully. And it's white, it's going to go under yellow, so it won't show through. If I was using dark fabric for that area and then light for the center, I definitely would trim that carefully, because that might show through the fabric because we're just using cotton fabric. Okay, I've got that all trimmed. Double check that my needle is still threaded. Yep. And now I'm going to start running the decorative finishing stitch. And since that thread is On there, I've taken care of the thread tail, so I don't have to worry about that. Okay, we're done with that white petal stitching. Let's change the thread one more time. And I'm putting in yellow just because I want it to kind of blend in with the background fabric, or the yellow petal fabric. But, you know, if you wanted to just use the same color for all of the steps, that would be lovely too. And that would have a very, you know, a very different look, but there are no rules with this. Okay, so I'm going to run the outline for the petal, or the center. And see how that thread is kind of caught there? That's from the tail. So I just moved that out of the way. And now I'm going to cover that with, again, this other little piece of fabric, just a scrap. You can see you don't need much fabric here at all. And now I'm going to run the tack down stitch. Oops, let's see if I got caught a little bit. Let's fix that. Okay, before we get too far. So now we're going to run the tack down. And there's that thread tail from the start. And you can see, so this is what I like to take care of at the beginning, and I missed it this time. So let's take care of that now, so it's not caught in our finishing stitches. Although we can clean it up later. I just like to clean it up now while I'm working on it. While I've got the scissors out, let's do all of it at one time. And with the heat and bond treated fabric, you can see that I'm pulling on the fabric just a tiny bit. I'm not yanking on it really hard. I'm just pulling on it a tiny bit just to give it a little bit of tension that allows me to get a little bit closer. And now we can run that finishing stitch. It's just a minute to run, not long at all. Okay, now for this next step, I am not going to change my thread. I am actually going to get this little piece of thread off right here. I'm going to just use the same thread because the next step, the thread is actually inside the project, so I'm not terribly worried about what color my thread is. But just to save us a little bit of time, I'm not going to change the thread. I am going to raise my presser foot, and now I'm going to put the backing fabric on. And the backing fabric is simply two pieces of the same fabric you used for the front, and you're going to layer them overlapping on the back side, or on top of your project. We don't need to work on the back of the hoop at all. And what I've done is I've just got those two pieces is bigger than the total front side together, and I folded over. Back up a little bit so you can see better. Okay, so what I have for the back of the project is two pieces of the fabric that are cut, according to the sizes of the cut list that you have in your tutorial. But they're basically just two pieces that together with the edges folded over a little bit are bigger than the outline, that placement stitch and that tack down stitch for the whole mug rug area. And now I am going to use a little bit of a tape to hold down my edges. And I'm not terribly worried if I stitch over this embroidery safe tape because I know that this comes out really well. If you're not sure about the kind of tape you have, you might want to do a test. Does the tape gum up your needle? Does it stick to both your fabric and your stabilizer? How easy is it to peel off? Some tapes are so sticky, they're really hard to remove. So I am taping this down though, because as this design works around the outline, your foot can get caught on these flaps. And so by putting a little tape there, it just gives me a little bit of extra security. You might want to slow your machine down. I just want to make sure that I'm not going to get caught anywhere. And I'm going to watch this quite closely as it goes around. So here we are. We're coming up. Wherever you put your fold, where those pieces meet, that is where you want to really watch closely. Okay, I made it over the hump. Now, as the machine comes around to this side, I'm going to have the same thing to watch for. So I'm just watching closely. It's not going terribly fast right now. We're almost done, but I just want to pay attention here. I don't like to leave my machine to do its thing. It kind of knows when I leave the room. That's when trouble happens. So I kind of stay right here with it, and we good. We made it. We made it. This is the home stretch now. All right, we're all finished. Now that is all of the stitching on the design, but we have to do a little bit more work. So I'm going to move my embroidery machine back so that we have room so you can see what I'm going to do here in front of me. And I'm taking the project off of the machine. Here we go. This is what it looks like on the front. This is what we have on the back. Okay. And we've got these layers that we are going to deal with. Now I'm going to take my hoop off of the embroidery machine. I like to save the tape and use it until it's all used up. So I'm just going to stick these here on my machine for later. Now I'm going to trim up some of these threads here. And all I need to do now is simply cut around that final outline. So I'm going to cut about a quarter to a half inch away. I'm going a little bit closer around those rounded corners. Okay, remember I told you I pulled these out of my scrap bin. So this is fabric that wasn't going to be used for anything else either. So I don't have to be super careful. Now, if I had a big chunk with that fabric, I might want to save it. But I think that has served us well, and it's done its job for us. And now all I need to do is flip this right side out. Now, if flipping things right side out is hard for you, like if it hurts your hands, then I recommend you use a tool like this. This is called the Easy Point and Turner by Fomore. Sue O'Berry with Suki Sews brought this back to the market for us. It's based on an old-fashioned tool, and it's just really easy to turn things right side out. It's like having an extra hand, and you simply insert the hook part in there, and then it gives you, it has a little locker right there, and it kind of holds it for you so that your hands don't have to do the hard work of getting this right side out. Okay, so I'm simply using that just to help me hold everything. You can also use the point of it to kind of round your corners and your seams and help roll those seams out for you, push the corners out. It's just a very handy tool. I love using it. Okay, so there's our mug rug. And here's that part where I can clip off a little more and see how you can bend your mug rug now and get really close to the stitching. I haven't fused anything yet, so that fabric is not fused down. I still have the opportunity to do some touch-ups if I need to or want to. You may like a little, kind of raw edge, ravelly look, and that would be totally cute too. So I'm just going to give all those places where I have a little bit of thread, or at the tail of a thread, right there, I've got a couple of threads. But there we have it. We're all done. And because of the way we did the back where we folded the edges, now our back has this is called an envelope style opening. And you can stitch this down with a little bit of hand stitching. You could use some fabric glue. You could use some double-sided tape, like Wonder Tape, like you would use to install zippers with. You could use a permanent fusible tape in there, or a strip of, the extra Heat and Bond Lite, just something in there to hold that down, to seal that up, because we don't need to get in there anymore ever again. But our mug rug is done, and now you are ready to go. So go get yourself a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, and enjoy using these little mug rugs. I hope this tutorial was helpful for you, and if it was, please leave me a comment and let me know how you use mug rugs in your house. Do you use them for beverages, or do you use them for gifts? They are great little gifts, especially for teachers, for friends, for coworkers, for anybody that likes a little coffee. It just brings a little bit of joy and fun, and we get to use more of our pretty fabrics and save those scraps from our scrap bins and being forgotten. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you have lots of fun making mug rugs with applique. And be sure to hit the like button on this video and subscribe for even more. We'll see you soon. Happy sewing!